Okay, so the last thing we're going to break down today is a transition. So you may remember when we were working on specifically in the sequences that we've done so far, when we were working on the Surya Namaskar Kriya, or what I was calling traditional sun salutation. This is the one we've done that has the lunge in it. You may recall that we move from downward facing dog, which is our upside down V, and we step forward into a lunge pose. So not only in that particular sequence of poses, but there will be many times throughout different sequences and that teachers will come up with where you'll do some sort of step through to lunge, whether it be from down dog or from plank. This can be quite a tricky transition at first. So I'm going to talk about it and demonstrate it, and then show you a few ways to help out of getting the leg in the right place when you step forward into lunge. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So for wherever we are, we're in this downward facing dog, right? So I'm in my upside down V pose. And then your instructor tells you to step that foot forward into a lunge pose. Now, some of us who've been doing this for a while, we can make it look really easy. But what tends to happen is, for many of us, especially when we're first starting, is we're in our down dog, or we may even be in a plank pose, and we step that foot forward, and it doesn't come as far through as we want it to be. So I step my foot forward. I'm trying to be in my lunge, but I want my foot to be kind of all the way up by my hands, right? So what do? Well, the first thing that I could do is I could literally take my hand, lift that leg up, and put it in the spot where I want it to be. So that is option one. So I'm in down dog. I step through. I don't step far enough. So I lift my leg with my hand, and I get that leg to the place where I want it so that my knee is over my ankle and I'm in a nice lunge. So that could be option one. Option two could be, so I know the teacher is going to tell me, or he has just told me that we're going to step through into lunge. So maybe what I do is I rest my knees gently down on the mat. Then I swing my leg forward to the place where I want it to be. Then I can curl my toes and press back up so I can lift in this case, it's my left knee up, and then I'm here in my lunge where I want it to be. So those are kind of the two main options of what you can do. Now, in addition to practicing and testing out either of those, there can be a couple of reasons why that leg may not easily pull through into lunge. One of it could be simply the length of your arms, right? The kind of the shoulder to wrist distance, and how much space you actually have to get that leg underneath and get that leg through. So that could be one of it. I'm one of those people who has some short arm things, and I can't, there are certain things that I don't do as well, or it can be helpful to have blocks. So another option, and I don't have my blocks to demonstrate, but you could always lift your hands up on blocks to practice having more space to swing that leg through. The other reason that it could be more of a challenge too is our abdominal strength. So if you'll remember back when we were practicing our plank pose, we were talking about rounding the upper spine and not sinking the shoulders down. So part of this round, if I round even further and I really tuck, I can start to lift my leg nice and high and step it through. And that's one thing I personally am still working on as well, is really getting that round, scooping that belly out so that I have enough strength to really pull that leg forward. And once people get deeper into the physical practice of yoga and maybe more in like a vinyasa flow practice, you'll see a lot where there's kind of that rounding, that tucking, where we're pulling the leg through. And they use this to help out in doing some fancy arm balances and other poses. But we're not worried about those things right now. So just know that the more you practice strengthening your abs, strengthening kind of in plank and some of those other things, we're really working on pulling that navel and strengthening the abdominals. It will help you have the strength to pull that leg through. So, but in the meantime, and maybe you stepped through and didn't have a problem. Maybe you're not like me. But in the meantime, as part of this week's homework, what we will practice is, or what you'll be practicing is figuring out the best way to step through the lunge. So my advice is to come into downward facing dog and just take turns alternating legs. So I take turns, I bend into my right knee first, I step it forward and I figure out how to get it through, or maybe I drop my knee down to get it through, and then I step back into down dog and do the same thing on the opposite side. So just practice going back and forth. Maybe the knees rest down, I pull it through, I step back up to lunge, I go back to down dog, and do the same thing on the other side. Let my knees come down, step through, press up to lunge, and then I step back to downward facing dog. And one reminder with this practice in particular, but any of your practices in the future, when you're doing something that is only on a particular side, like for instance, stepping the right leg through to lunge, you want to make sure that you do it equally on both sides. So when you're practicing this transition, practice equal number of times on the right and the left. And usually the easiest way to remember that is just alternate. So first step through with the right leg, then step through with the left. So just keep switching sides back and forth so that you've done it equal amount of times right and left. And if you're doing something else in the future, like let's say you're practicing a twist or something like that, a pose that you might hold, a good way to practice equal on both sides is just to count the number of breaths. So you may hold a twist on one side for 5 breaths, and then make sure you hold it for 5 breaths on the other side. So the reminder there, and I'm telling you from personal experience, and many of us can tell you, is, for instance, when teaching a private or a class and only demonstrating something on one side, and then not demonstrating on the other side because maybe I'm walking around and helping out or whatever, I've completely thrown my spine or my hips or whatever out of whack because I did something that was maybe a little deeper intense on one side and I didn't do it on the other side, so it really threw my body out of balance. So that's the other reminder, is always do it equal on both sides. So when you're practicing your step through, do it as many times on the right leg as you do on the left. So good luck with your practice this week, and I'll see you for the next video.